Welcome, everyone, to the November meeting of New York City Transit and its subsidiary and affiliates, Manhattan and Bronx Surface Transit Operating Authority, thank you, and Staten Island Rapid Transit Operating Authority. Thank you, John Banks, for filling in last month. The minutes of that meeting are in the book. Does anyone have any additions or corrections? Is there a second to accept the minutes? You have an objection?
Well, I have a correction.
Oh, okay.
On page 1.4, when it's quoting me, and President Prendergast advised that the L service would extend to the Rockaways, it should say to Rockaway Parkway, not to the Rockaways.
Oh. We all knew that. Well, the minutes will be deemed corrected and as corrected approved. I believe that we have public speakers. Is there a public speaker?
We have one public speaker, Mr. Chairman. That public speaker is Murray Bowden.
Hello, Murray Bowden.
Morning. Last night, in order to save paper, I pulled off the agenda on the internet. Out of the 5 I pulled off, only one of them is numbered correctly in a manner which one could use, and that was Metro North. The page numbering on these reports make no sense to the next generation of internet and electronic format. Why is it important? Because in today's New York Times, the major article about newspapers says newspapers will not be printed on paper in the future, at least for the largest newspaper chain in the United States. Which means that all of those documents that you have in front of you are moving to the internet. Now, somebody has to take responsibility to say, let's bring this show into the 21st century. And numbering the pages for PDF format is only an example of what needs to change. Beyond that, each of the staff members who makes a report needs to say, the numbers are in the report, my opinion is such. To do a recitation of the numbers that are already in the book, rather a waste of time. And for those board members who are sitting over here without a computer in front of them, we're moving to a world of computers. And if you sitting around this table don't have a computer in front of each of you, or at least you don't have to use it, it should at least be there because most of you use it in your other lives. We now have a computer in the kitchen. My wife's given up her office upstairs, and those are all our work right in the kitchen. The world is moving to a connected world.
Mr. Bowden, please summarize your remarks.
In summary, it is the responsibility of management to lead. And sitting around this table is management.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we have one more speaker. The person just showed up. His name is Bernard Silik. He's here to speak on the BX30.
Good morning. I'm Bernard Silage. I'm a 40-year resident of Co-op City, and I'm a member of the Riverway Board of Directors. In regard to the question of BX30, that's what I'm come to address, but I'd like to preface my remarks to the following. The Transit Authority is set up to help the economy in New City, New York. You can't measure the income and expenses just by the ledger books of the MTA. It must be measured by the entire economy of the city of New York. Imagine if the Transit Authority were to be closed down. That would paralyze, actually destroy the economy of our city. And therefore, whenever we go ahead and look at these numbers, MTA must consider what effect it has on the economy of the city. Many cities in the world actually practically charge a minimal fee for people to use transit in order to ensure that the economy is vibrant and continuous. Here we try to see how we can increase the fares and cut back the services, in essence endangering the very city's growth and economy. In regard to Co-op City, for almost 50 years ago, the builders came before the city of New York and offered them that they were going to build an entire city of 15,000 units with 2 shopping centers, educational park, schools, all it needs for 15,000 families. However, they came to the city to get an agreement from them, and they got it, a covenant, that the city would build all the infrastructure necessary, and the MTA would provide them with the necessary essential transit system, because there was no subway near. And they did. So for 40 years, we've enjoyed bus 26 and 28 that serviced the community. It served the entire community. It served from Co-op City through Gun Hill Road and Alton Avenue. Serviced hospitals, shopping malls, veteran centers. Now, what happened? Last year, in its wisdom, MTA decided we need to cut this contiguous service for our community. You understand, from Section 5, families have to go to Section 4 to go to the administration office. Or families from Section 5 want to go to a retirement center in Section 1. Or children need to go to schools.
Mr. Sillard, can you summarize?
So now what happened was...
Can you summarize your remarks, please,
yes,
sir?
I will. Just one more minute, please. So what happened? The MTA, in its wisdom, went ahead and did not cut bus 26 and 28. This bus 26 and 28 still continues, except what it did, it went ahead and cut the service to 10,000 families. Now it's trying to make up for it. And these 2 buses still serve the community, except it doesn't serve 10,000 families, 2/3 of our community. Now, what it did to save money, but it added another bus to try to make up for it, bus 28. So now in what logic does it make sense? You say you're trying to save money, you cut a service, and you add another bus. Now you're trying to make up for it in bus 30. But bus 30 is not adequate. It still cuts out 10,000 families. So what we need is really, MTA is interested in saving money? Fine. Cut out 38, reinstall the full route of 26, 28. We've had 3 major meetings in our community, rallies. 600 families showed up. We collected 5,000 signatures requesting that you recontinue bus 26 and 28. And if you're interested in saving money, don't reroute 30. Discontinue 38, and we continue bus 26, 28. You solve the problem. It doesn't make sense rationally to save money by cutting out bypassing 2/3 of the community with bus 26, 28, when the bus 26, 28 is still serving the community. That's my remarks.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions for me? No? Nobody wants to cry?
We thank our public speakers. I believe we have a rare but insignificant change to the work plan.
Actually, the work plan does include charter revisions to the committee charter, but there are none proposed this month. So,
Okay. The Secretary will note that. It's now my pleasure to introduce the former interim chief executive officer of the MTA and still the president of New York City Transit, Tom Prendergast.
Thank you, Mr. LeBeau. Carmen Bianco, operations report, please. Subways.
Good morning. Subway performance results for the month of September and the 12-month average where appropriate are as follows. The 12-month rolling average for system-wide subway weekday weight assessment was 78.3 in September. This of 11, that's a 1/10 of a percentage point decrease from 78.4 in September of 10. We've previously advised the committee that we were exploring how to improve our reporting on weight assessment. Weight assessment is a better measure of our customers' experience than terminal on-time performance. Last year, in the summer of 2010, we tightened our standard for weight assessment so that we consider service to be good when trains arrive at their station no later than 25% of the scheduled headway. Thus, for example, where the scheduled service interval is 2 minutes, the service standard is met if the train arrives no more than 30 seconds beyond its scheduled headway. In order to better show gradations in the quality of weight assessment, we will expand our weight assessment report beginning in January of 2012. The new report, which is explained in more detail in your books on page 8.5, will not alter our current standard. It'll simply add details that show service gaps not just at the acceptable level of plus 25%, but also at the 25 to 50% level, the plus 50 to 100% level, and service gaps over 100% of the scheduled headways. So that report will begin in January of next year. Turning to on-time performance, system-wide weekday OTP was 84.5. That's a decrease of 1.5% over the 86 in September of 10. System-wide weekend OTP was 90.1%. That's up 4.1% from September of 2010. Significant incidents that impacted on-time performance in September included the water main break at 110th and Central Park West, a high water condition at 145th and St. Nicholas due to heavy rains, and emergency switch repairs at Queens Plaza. There were also significant weekday increases in maintenance work occurring under flagging protection on the 2, 4, and 5 routes on the IRT. Weekend OTP on the west side and Pelham line in the IRT improved dramatically thanks to a reduction in major construction work. Moving on to key performance indicators, system-wide KPI, service KPI was 82.3. That's down 0.5% from 82.8 in September of 10. System-wide passenger environment survey KPI was 91.3. That's down 0.7 from 92 in September of 10. And for Staten Island Railway, the service KPI is not reported. However, their PES KPI was 84.6. That's down 4.2% from 88.8 in September of 10. Moving on to mean distance between failure, it increased in the month of September at 154,500 miles. It was up 4.4% from 148,004 miles in September of 10. The 12-month average was 172,217. That's up 2% from the preceding 12 months. That concludes the operations report.
Thank you, Carmen. Anybody have any questions or cross-examination of Carmen? He knows what he's talking about. Jeff?
I got a question I'm actually scared to ask. I mean, the safest answer might be one that's written. How has the 2 pilots of the trash receptacles been received?
Very good question. Although it's very early, I ask that very same question often because I want to stay up on where we are. We're not noticing any real increase in the amount of trash that we're picking up on the platform and/or on the tracks. And as a matter of fact, the number of bags that we generate out of those 2 locations is down about 1/3. So far, it's very, very early, but we'll continue to report out as time goes on. But so far, we're not seeing any a greater amount of trash in the area.
And I'd like to add that in the tests that we're doing, we probably were silent. It's not one size fits all. Even if that test were proved to be valid for those particular stations, it would not necessarily be the case that we would put it everywhere. It's only at certain targeted stations where the volumes are such that we need to evaluate it. But we will be back to the committee before we make any changes.
Chuck?
Comment. The report on page 3.7 indicates, and I congratulate you for it, a second month of decrease in the wait time and improvement on the number 1 and on the number 6 line as compared to the 12 months preceding. I have 2 questions. The first one is, 1 and 6 is doing better. The public's getting better service in terms of wait time. Why is it that there is any relevancy then to And by the way, the same thing happens on the weekends, too, on 1 and 6. Why is there any relevance to the arrival at the station, weekend terminal time and regular terminal time? In other words, there it's the people standing on a platform are getting trains faster with less wait time on the 1 and 6. But the 1 and 6 are arriving at the terminal apparently either later than they had before or through some delay. Why is there relevance and why is it happening?
Well, it could be that the construction work that we were seeing out there on the 2 and the 5 is winding down. It could be that. But again, the weight assessment is simply a measure of the train arriving at the station on its scheduled headway plus, within the tolerance of the 25%, and that's what you're seeing.
And that's what the public cares about.
That's what the
Because
public
train
cares
gets
about.
there.
Absolutely.
They don't care that it gets to the terminal on time.
Well, that's why we're going to offer that new report in January, because it actually provides greater detail on those statistics. It actually shows, when you look at, from a minor perspective, how many trains are making their station stops within that 25 to 50%. So you'll see better detail come January.
The second part, if I may, is I'd like to take you to page 3.22, which is the PES KPI for stations. And again, we have the issue with respect to the Bronx having the lowest score on the stations. And first, let me say that President Prendergast has taken great pains to make a priority of 2 of the worst stations that we have in the Bronx, and for that I thank him. My question, though, is why is it that we don't ask Capital Construction to do the work in fixing up the stations, since they have experience in the construction activity?
Well, we actually are doing that under the component program in capital construction, and we are addressing the components rather than an out-of-phase station rehabilitation. Fred, did you want to elaborate on that?
I think it was a different question, if I may. When the capital, he was referring to, it was an earlier conversation, if I may, you were referring to the capital construction company being more involved in the transit's capital construction work. I'll take a shot historically. When the capital construction company was created, it was intended basically to focus on the mega projects, while the capital divisions within the agencies would work in tandem with the operations within the industry. And that's, there's a lot of historical there, and cooperation that's worked out within the agency is something we can probably talk more about. I think something as a board we can discuss this. It's been long debated and long discussed. I think the capital divisions within the organizations have an enormous amount of talent as well, and have worked hand in hand with the operating agencies, reporting directly to the president of the operating agencies as well, has worked hand in hand for some time, but it's always worthy to bring up that discussion once again.
Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff, as you know, was the former director of operations of the city of New York and was so successful that he was bought off by private industry and left. But thanks, thank you. Who's next?
Next is Cheryl Kennedy, safety report.
Okay, moving on to safety. The subway customer accident rate decreased slightly by 1.7% compared to the previous 12-month period. In the month of August, the accident rate decreased by 10.5%, moving to 2.63 per million customers, subway customers, from a rate of 2.94 last year. The employee lost time accident rate decreased 16.6% for the month of September 2011 versus September 2010. However, the rolling 12-month rate increased by 9.6% over the previous 12-month period. There were 72 confirmed fires for the month of September, down 25.8% from the previous year. Fires decreased over the last 12 months by 3.6%. 100% of all fires were categorized as being low or average in severity for the month of September.
Any questions for Cheryl?
Moving on to crime, we have Deputy Chief Owen Monahan.
Good morning. Well, the Transit Bureau is experiencing a year-to-date increase in index crime of 16%. That's, as of last week, that's an increase of 291 crimes. Well, grand larceny accounts for 82% of this increase. And we've heard this before, but I'd like to give a brief analysis of what the crime picture is. Obviously, grand larceny is the issue. Right now, we're up 23% in grand larcenies. Year to date, 70% of those grand larcenies occurred on the train, often between 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. Electronics were taken 55% of the time. Now, let me explain the grand larceny itself. There are three separate types of tactics that the bad guys use for grand larceny. One is snatches, hand snatches. That accounts for 50% of our grand larcenies. Pickpockets, either from the bag or from the person, that's 20% of the grand larcenies. And in the third category, what we've always called lush workers. That's where a bad guy is using a razor blade to cut open the pocket of a sleeping or intox passenger. That has occurred 17% year to date. Now, the crime is experienced throughout the system in the following proportions. Manhattan accounts for 40% of the crime. Brooklyn accounts for 33% of the crime. Queens with 14%, and Bronx with 13% of the total subway crime. We are out there. We have over 200,000 enforcement contacts, and that includes 21 guns removed from bad guys on the system. A total of over 39,000 arrests, and summonses include over 87,000 summonses. So what are we doing about it? Besides the enforcement, we've come up with some specific tactics to deal with the increase. The one thing that is relatively new in the system is the use of decoys, decoy operations. This involves a team of plainclothes officers working with the decoy officer who rides the train or stands on a platform that fits the pattern of the typical subway victim. He or she either has a phone in his or her hand, or it could be a phone in a bag. The decoy is observed, and arrests have been made. These decoy operations have been highly successful this past year and have netted some very problematic criminals. 19 individuals have been arrested this year as a result of these decoy operations. I'll give you some examples of some of the types of some of the bad guys we've grabbed. Kasim Thomas, he's been arrested 42 times, and that includes 17 grand larcenies and 4 robberies. Larry Taylor, 46 times arrested, including 7 robberies and 2 grand larcenies. And an Anthony Simon, 18 prior arrests, including 22 grand larcenies and 9 robberies. So the NYPD is currently training additional officers in decoy operations, which will significantly increase our decoy capabilities throughout the entire subway system. A class was completed last week, and another class is in. We anticipate being able to double that capability of decoy operations.
Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Deputy Chief. Chuck.
Chief, crime is up in the subways for the past several months and for the year as a whole. Arrests are down for the past several months and the year as a whole. That's not good. We're on our way back to the bad old times of roughly 2007, so that we are in worse shape today than we were for the last 5 years. I'd like to know, how many police officers do you have assigned to your bureau who are out working in the Transit Bureau this year as compared to last year? Is it more or is it less?
As in the entire department, we are dealing with the fewer number of officers. Right now, the Bureau has on its roll 20 2,276 officers assigned to the Bureau. Our officers are working hard. Like I mentioned, over 200,000 enforcement contacts. We have been focusing on the train, platforms and trains, moving away from the turnstiles where crime is not occurring.
Chief, I'm sure that the person who was robbed, mugged, or the like on the subway is not going to be terribly impressed with the number of contacts you've made, but is going to be impressed by the fact there's less blue on the trains, there's less decoys on the trains, there's less enforcement. That's unacceptable.
Well, there are not less decoys on the train. Like I just explained, we have increased it significantly. Decoys are on the trains, and they are netting bad guys.
Chief.
And these contacts are resulting in numerous examples of really bad guys that are being taken off the system.
Chief.
One method of removing these bad guys is another tactic that we're doing, which goes into the parole stipulation program. Parole stipulations. Our offenders are oftentimes repeat offenders. So what we've done is, working with our partners in Division of Parole, we've been able to attach conditions or stipulations to their parole. Once they're arrested and they're placed on parole, they now have conditions that ban them from the subway. Some of these exclusions are 24/7. Some of them are time exclusions, such as 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Ignoring the parole conditions is cause for being violated and sent back to jail.
Chief, there are less cops on the force in the Bureau. There are less arrests. There are more crimes. I don't have the statistics as to the number of convictions. That's obviously an issue for the district attorneys, and they've got to start doing their job as well. My point to you in all of this is we need more cops in the subway. The people have an absolute right to safety and to quiet in the subway. If they can't get it, somebody's got to pay for it, because it's not going to be the MTA.
Can I make a quick comment?
Any other questions for Deputy Chief Jeff?
Quick comment. I don't think the MTA pays for the NYPD at all in the system. The City of New York does. But the second point, and my question really is for you, is historically, how does the crime over the statistics, and while we should always be vigilant and should be going down, how does that compare historically?
Well, historically, today this increase of 16% represents an average increase of less than one crime per day. Now, we've said before, historically, if you look at the period of 1990, the Bureau was dealing with 49 crimes per day. And right now it's less than 7 crimes per day. So that's the perspective. No increase is acceptable. I agree with the board that this is not acceptable, and we are going to be doing everything we can to get that reduction back. We are working smarter with the officers we have. The programs that I've been laying out is actually netting bad guys off the system. And with some of these programs, such as the parole stipulation program, they're going to stay off the system.
Chief, in 2006, the average was 6.26%. In 2011, it's 6.77. We are on the increase in crime, not on the decrease. We are on our way to the bad old days. That's just not good.
Your point is well taken, and I do take exception to the fact that we are on our way to the bad old days. We will not let that happen.
I will rely on your assurance.
Fred?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, I think the temperature you're experiencing is a direct result of last month's meeting, where we been confronted by some pretty serious numbers, and we didn't have a police department representative. And the question really was, and let's take the 24% increase, I believe, in grand larceny, because it's, trouble with averages when you put everything into index crimes. really isn't descriptive of much. It tends to flatten the incidents that we really ought to be paying attention to. Let's focus on grand larceny for a second. With a 24% increase this year and a 4% decrease in arrests, the question is obvious. One, not only what are we doing about it, which you've answered, but what resources are we deploying to do something about it? Let me give you some more texture to that question. Last week, last meeting, we also discussed attacks on bus drivers. Those are up. And we, I think, read something in the paper over the weekend about a new protocol that's being used for bus drivers to call in. And it provokes a question, well, why can't they just call 911 themselves? Or better still, what are we doing to address those areas of crime where they are most prone to happen? We had public speakers, mostly from the Transport Workers Union, last meeting as well, who gave some very startling texture to the commentary about attacks on MTA workers. I'm glad to read that the incoming chairman and CEO of the MTA is being proactive in talking with the district attorneys about all this. But again, it provokes the question, what are we doing about it, and what resources are we deploying? Now, without giving up any state secrets, Chief, how many police officers are assigned to this? It is obvious that with an increase of the magnitude of 24% and a decrease in the number of arrests of 4%, something bad's happening. The question is, in specific terms, what is the police department doing to arrest this, no pun intended, so that, one, we have more of a presence in subways and near troublesome bus routes, and two, we can prevent the kind of not only spike in crime but attacks on MTA employees that concern us all?
Well, your concern with the employees is well-founded, and it's certainly all of the Transit Bureau's concern. Transit employees that have been assaulted in the subway, we have dealt with very aggressively, one-on-one with the employees. Over the last 2 months, Captain Wynn in the Bronx has actually conducted face-to-face assemblies with crew members in crew rooms, in the turnout areas, where we've spoken to employees about how not to be a victim. The victimology on the subway employees tend to be train operators looking out their window or conductors waking up people at the end of the terminal. We've addressed that with certain tactics, certain ways to deal with these situations which have resulted in assaults. Of the 8 subway workers that have been assaulted this past year, 3 have resulted in arrests. We are going to continue this crime prevention awareness with the employees working hand in hand. Mr. Bianco and his team has lent us assistance providing these venues for these employees to come and sit down and actually interact with our captains dealing with crime prevention. So that's something that's going to continue throughout the entire system. The resources that we have at our beck and call is the entire police department, the 35,000 members of the department. Dealing with counterterrorism on a daily basis, we continuously have officers from patrol down into the subway in our critical response vehicle operations, which bring officers from all over the city into high targeted areas such as the subway.
Chief, please suffer the interruption, because I certainly don't want to dominate questioning time here, and I want to get to the real point. 24% increase in grand larceny, 4% decrease in arrests. What percent increase in assignment of police officers to New York City transit duties?
I'm sorry, what assignment?
Yeah, what percent increase in the assignment of police resources to arrest this problem? Again, no pun intended.
I can't give an assignment how many more police officers it would take to reduce crime.
Have we thought about it?
We are going to reduce crime with the resources that we have available.
Is there an increase in resources?
Well, there is a police academy class coming out forthwith. The exact numbers have not been determined, but we will be getting police officers when the academy graduates their recruits. So that is one positive, concrete answer I can give you.
And I hope it nets out more than the retirements. But
I do too.
But while we're both hoping, Chief, I'm sure you can understand members of the board, and more particularly our customers, are concerned about, well, do we have an increase in resources addressing this problem in the offing? That's not an unreasonable question, and I think it demands a reasonable answer.
Well, I have just given you a very solid answer in the fact that police recruits will be assigned to the Bureau when they graduate, which is in a short amount of time. I don't have the exact date when they graduate.
Chief, in my travels around the system, I see a lot of now unattended subway entrances, and I see an increasing amount of people entering without paying through those entrances. Some of them have cameras and some of them do not. I hope that we're moving to put cameras where we have taken away the booth attendants and a pair of eyes to watch people coming in the system, because if you recall, many years ago, whenever somebody was arrested for fare evasion, they had a much more serious group of crimes on their repertoire. So to what extent is the police department utilizing the cameras that do exist in the system? Are they being watched in real time? If you see somebody going in, is it reported to somebody in real time, or is this just something that's looked at a week later?
No, 3 major hubs have cameras that are monitored in real time. Penn Station, Times Square, and Grand Central Station. The over 550 cameras that are at those locations are monitored by officers that are on limited duty that are assigned to the Transit Bureau 24/7. And we have numerous examples of through their monitoring, officers have responded and made arrests on incidents that are occurring in front of them on the monitor. So those locations are monitored in real time. There are other cameras that are tied into the Lower Manhattan Security Initiative, and there are thousands of cameras that are actually monitored, not monitored, but utilized in investigations after the fact, albeit. Yeah. But and that too has resulted in numerous wanted posters and successful investigations.
I would just guess, from riding around, that those 3 stations that are monitored in real time are probably not the places where major crimes are being committed. The suburban rail terminal hubs and.
Well, I'm actually talking the subway locations.
Yeah, I am too.
3, 4, and 8, 3, 4, and 7.
Yeah.
Grand Central. Those are pretty busy stations.
That's the point. Somebody's likely to enter the system at a far-flung station that is probably not being monitored on a real basis, and that's where your problem lies.
Right.
Jeff? Just another quick question. I'm sorry. The numbers that we're referring to, and obviously they're going up, and that's a problem. The grand larceny numbers. I think you mentioned this in the past. What makes up the largest percent of those numbers? Does the personal computers and the iPods and everything?
Yeah. Well,
getting more and more in the system, driving those numbers up.
We said 50% of the grand larcenies are from hand snatches, and this whole tactic that the bad guys are using, when the train door opens, if you ride the train, every other person on the train has some type of device, whether it's an iPod or an iPhone or a Kindle. The iPhone, it's an $800 item, and they're taking them and fencing them. We've conducted what we like to call cell phone reverse stings. In the last couple of months, we've conducted secondary interviews. When we arrest these folks that are stealing these phones through our patrol, we're coming down and we're interviewing them to get the location of where they're selling the phones. What are they doing with the phones? And we've interviewed over 60 individuals that have stolen phones, and through those 60, we've come up with over 33 locations where they're selling them. And what we've done is we've followed up with undercovers going in, attempting to sell phones that the Transit Authority has made available to us, the phones that are desirable, the iPhone 4S. We go in, we attempt to sell it, and when we make a buy, that person is arrested. Now, we've arrested 18 individuals. One of those individuals, 2 weeks ago, was a fugitive for 18 years, and he finally got arrested by buying a stolen phone, and now he owes time for an assault one that he committed 18 years ago. So there is a lot of success, not enough, but that's the type of thing that we're going to focus on, that we have been focusing on, the electronic devices. And it's not only a New York problem. My colleagues throughout the nation have indicated that this is an issue on transit systems in all areas of the country.
I have two comments. First, a question. Chief, would it be possible for us to receive, commencing 2012, any information that you would have comparing the number of arrests as a number between January of 2012 and January of 2011, etc.? Monthly comparison of the number of people you have working in the Bureau 1 year as against the prior year.
I will certainly bring that request to my boss, Chief Joseph Fox, who's not here today because he's with the police commissioner on an unavoidable event. But I will certainly bring that back, and hopefully we'll be able to provide you with that.
The second part is a suggestion, Mr. Chairman, and that is perhaps our Inspector General could be in touch with the district attorneys of the 5 counties to get an understanding and report back to us as to what they are doing to convict, prosecute, do what has to be done following whatever arrests are made. It does no good to arrest if you don't prosecute. And to the extent that they will claim a lack of personnel to do it, I'm sure we can find pro bono lawyers among the law firms who will be happy to serve as special assistant DAs to help prosecute these bums.
And they'll all come from your law firm, I hope.
I'll be happy to send you a lot of them.
I understand the Inspector General has offered his services there, and we're going to follow through and see if we can't accomplish that. A good suggestion. Are we now ready to turn to something as boring as finances?
Yes. Preliminary September 2011 fare box revenue was $316.8 million, $4.5 million above forecast, including a $5.3 million positive retroactive average fare adjustment to preliminary July and August revenue. Year-to-date fare box revenue was $2,700 million, $18.4 million below forecast, mostly due to the effects of Hurricane Irene in August. The average non-student fare in September 2011 was $1.65. And in constant 1996 dollars, the average fare fell from $1.38 in 1996 to $1.11 in 2011.
Wait a minute. Would you say that again?
In constant 1996 dollars, the average fare fell from $1.38 in 1996 to $1.11 in 2011.
You're saying that if we were frozen in 1996, it's a third cheaper to ride the subway now as compared with them?
Actually, less than a quarter cheaper, but not frozen.
Mr. Chairman, can you tell me why it is then when I swipe my Metro card it says $2.25?
Because we're not frozen in 1996, Freddie.
The trouble with averages.
All right, I apologize for interrupting you, Tom.
Preliminary September 2011 operating expenses before depreciation and other personnel expenses were below forecast by $7.1 million, 1.5%, due mostly to payroll underruns, lower non-revenue vehicle purchases, and the favorable timing of several non-labor expenses and lower paratransit completed trips, partly offset by higher overtime costs and power fuel prices. Year-to-date, operating expenses are $40.4 million below forecast, due primarily to paratransit underruns, mainly from lower completed trips, payroll underruns, and the favorable timing of several non-labor expenses, partly offset by higher overtime expenses. Turning to ridership, September 2011 ridership totaled 196 million, 1.8% below forecast, due in part to the later start of the school year than expected and 2 weekdays with heavy rain. Year-to-date ridership was 1.71 billion, 1.1% below forecast. September 2011 average weekday subway ridership was 5.4 million, an increase of 2.9% from September of the prior year. And September 2011 average weekday local bus ridership was 2.2 million, a decrease of 3.6% from the prior year. Average weekday express bus ridership was 42,000, a slight increase of 0.5 percentage point from September of 2010. Average weekday paratransit ridership was 29,000, a decrease of 1.3% from September 2011. Looking to preliminary October financial results, due to the short time period and the advanced scheduling of this month's meeting, we do not have that information at this time.
Chuck?
Tom, page 4.9 reflects that except for the subways and Staten Island Railway, there continues to be a downward spiral in the use of mass transit buses, express buses, and the like. And if you look at the bottom of the page, you see the statistics from Bridges, which shows that they too are declining. So that you can't say that people who aren't traveling anymore on mass transit other than subways are going by car. Where are they going?
Well,
how are
certainly,
they getting around?
It's conjecture on our part, but certainly the economy is down and there are less people taking discretionary trips. Certainly the value of the subway ride, as you see it, that's holding strong. And even in some of the numbers that we prepared and gave to this committee 2 months ago, when we went through the analysis of the effect of the service cuts on the bus side of the house, indicated that people were leaving that mode and switching over to subways. But in large part, ridership across the patch, with the exception of subways, is down, probably due to the economy.
Is it possible that by constricting access to the buses in terms of reduction in service and the like, that we are engaged in wish fulfillment?
Well, I've been in this business for 35 years, and whenever you
That's
cut
why
service,
you're respected.
Whenever you cut service, there is a vicious circle with respect to the negative impact it has. But at the end of the day, you have a certain amount of money you have to provide the service. So that's the conundrum we operate under. And we're trying to put the dollars into those modes of transportation where we're getting the best return on the investment and protecting the core of services for the people that need them on a daily basis.
Has anybody figured out what it would cost to increase local bus ridership? What it would cost to return it back to where it was, or to fill the void?
Prior to your being on the board, we went through a long process with the board members with respect to how we were going to cut service. Yes, we can recreate some of those numbers, but for each and every route, there is a subsidy per customer and what we call a fare box operating ratio. And for some of the routes that we were cutting, an extremely low fare box recovery ratio. Less than 30%, I believe, in some of the routes we cut. Is Peter here? So for every one of those routes we put back, we're losing 70 cents on the dollar. So it's pretty hard with respect to the limited finances we have, especially when compared with where we would put that money in terms of critical inspection and maintenance work that needs to go on in the system, how you make that decision.
To follow through on one of Chuck's points, by eliminating some bus routes, you actually probably lost that customer to the MTA system as a whole, because many of those bus route customers changed to a subway or a commuter train or something at some point. So if you lost them at their initial point of boarding, you may have lost them altogether.
We did say that in the analysis. There was a segment of the population, there was a segment of the ridership population, we could not ascertain where they went. We might have lost them in total. If they lost a job and they weren't working, we might have lost them in total.
Yeah. But that would have been a temporary loss.
Until they come back to work.
Right.
All right, our next conundrum is our capital program, I believe.
Good morning.
Fred.
Looking to capital results, commitments during the month of September totaled $156.6 million, including a number of key projects, 2 in the signal program area, 1 involving communications-based train control, CBTC signal equipment. For interoperability testing, that's going to be installed on the F line between 4th Avenue and Church to enable us to do interoperability testing of current and future CBTC suppliers. Second signal project was to add station time circuits on the Lexington Avenue Express tracks in Manhattan, which will allow us to increase or shorten the headway on those tracks. Another project was to create a fully ADA accessible station at Forest Hills 71st Street on the Queens Boulevard line, and a project in Staten Island, which is rehabilitation work to address structural deficiencies on 8 stations on the Staten Island Railway. Projects that reached substantial completion totaled $26 million during the month of September. 1 was the repair of hatchways, which is our access points between stations at 8 locations. And 2 projects were work on our communication rooms, where we're improving or increasing, expanding the space within the communication rooms at 23 stations. That work was completed. That concludes my report.
What was the matter with the hatchways?
The hatchways are being upgraded. These are access points where you climb a ladder up to the street, a hinged device that you enter into the sidewalk, so to bring them up to code and to refurbish them from the original installation.
Jeff?
I'm not sure if this question is for transit or for Fred in general. What is the current status of the, I believe it's in the capital plan, is the fare collection project? Is that a better question at CPOC or for MTA headquarters? But, you know, I've heard a lot of things about start-installed RFPs.
The new fare payment system, which is an MTA-managed project, has been reported on twice at CPOC. I believe the last presentation was 2 cycles ago. There's another one scheduled. And they are about ready to go on the street with an RFP for some additional services. And there has been a hold. There's an understanding between Charlie and I to make sure that we're in alignment with respect to what the scope of work is and how that interfaces with other projects we have ongoing at New York City Transit.
I'm not on the CPOC committee. If you can send me the presentation.
Sure.
Procurements, to use a bad word.
Good morning. Moving on to Section 6 of the agenda, the procurement package this month includes 2 actions totaling $5.9 million in expenditures.
Anybody have any questions with respect to the procurements which are in the book? Andrew?
Steve, in the matter of F&S, did we not know when we planned the renovation of Smith 9th and 4th Avenue that we were going to be improving the lighting and
No, as a matter of fact, the staff summary indicates that due to budget constraints that the platform lighting was not included, nor was the PACIS. When we received the additional funds, that's when we decided to revisit it and decided that we were going to add those 2 pieces components to the project.
So we were going to renovate those stations without new lighting and without these other improvements?
Platform edge lighting and the PACIS, that's correct.
Andrew, we crossed the threshold a while back with respect to the constraints in the capital program. It's a very, very difficult issue for us. We'd like to walk into a station, and when we leave doing renovation work, we leave it in a state of good repair across all elements. Certainly, if there's a safety item, we have to address that. If it's a category, I think Category 5 is the worst category in terms of station defects. But when we've had to constrain the costs expended in the program, we've had to look at stations differently, and that's why we have the component program. So in some cases, the scope gets limited because of the budget. As we get more money, and in some cases we even get funds from third parties, elected officials, and they add to the scope of the project with money so that we can actually add to the scope of the project.
When you do this kind of incremental add-ons, which we've seen endlessly, how does that jibe with the initial bid and what one contractor won that bid? I mean, when you're going to add things after the fact, you know, if I was a losing contractor, why wouldn't I say, hey, wait a minute, why didn't I have it? You know, I would have put that in my initial bid.
The best way to do it is before we go out in the street and we know the scope and we don't change the scope. And in an ideal world, that's what we try to do. In this case, I believe member funds from elected officials came across, which gave us the ability to add scope to this project. Then we're in a position where we don't want to say no to the elected official because his constituents or her constituents feel pretty strongly that they'd like to expend that money to be able to add that scope to the work. And that's exactly what we did in this case.
I'd like to focus on NOR for a moment as an example. I have a problem with sole source. It's anti-competitive. It's anti-job.
Chuck, is your mic on?
I have a problem with sole source. It's anti-competitive. It's anti-jobs. It costs us money. And the question I have is the following. NOR apparently is a situation where you maintain that they are the only available supplier for these kind of brakes. Is that correct?
That's correct. For the items, for the higher-end assemblies and the parts that they manufacture from the beginning. That's correct.
And so I would say to you, if I may, what I said in trains this morning. In the future, when you issue procurements, can you make a factor in determining whether or not to select A rather than B? The fact that parts, if necessary, computer equipment and the like, are available at an alternate source, or at the very least, that the person that is the successful bidder gives you a license to use the computer software so that you can have a generic supplier just copy it, or do something that factors in the consideration that proprietary software and hardware almost invariably costs you money down the road.
We've actually started on that road in newer procurements where we're pushing that particular agenda. It's important to note that this has been resisted for many, many years in the transit industry, particularly on the rolling stock end, for a number of reasons. One, for the obvious reason that they want to control certain aspects of it, particularly in this particular instance where it's brake items and they're safety related. On a yearly basis, we meet with the major suppliers of systems like brake. The other competitor here is Wabtec. So when we go out for train procurements, both Knorr and Wabtec are qualified. To that end, we're having competition at sort of at the higher end. There's significant resistance when we bring the presidents in of each of those companies, and we ask them and we show them the items from their competitor. Can you manufacture this? Can you look at this? Can you reverse engineer it? There needs to be a marketplace that they say is much greater than ours in order for them to invest the engineering that goes into that particular investment. They need to reverse engineer it. They need to test it because we're not going to put sort of knockoff parts on a train.
When people in business have a lock on that line of business for an extended period of time, nobody is going to want to compete. You have 2, maybe 3 companies that have had for over 20 years all of the subway car manufacture and all of the Metro North and Long Island Railroad train manufacture. No one is going to want to compete in that atmosphere for the simple reason, and there are competitors, whether it be Dailin in China or the other companies that are out there. No one's going to want to compete when they believe somebody's got a lock. My point in all of this is I congratulate you for trying to break that pattern, and I intend to be a pain in the neck for as long as I'm on this board to make sure that that practice continues of your trying to break that pattern.
And we are absolutely making headway in that regard, and I will tell you that we push this agenda aggressively, both at the APTA conferences throughout the years. We have our sole source items advertised. They're on our website. Staff is continuously moving towards getting in alternate suppliers, folks that are interested. It's a hurdle. It is no doubt about it, but it's something we share your passion, and we are absolutely aggressively approaching
I'd like to add to Steve's comment. Under a separate item that you've probably seen report on at other committees, there's an Oliver Wyman consultant that's looking at rolling stock for us. And one of the efforts they're going to look at is the long-term strategies we employ across all the rail agencies at procuring rolling stock, buses as well. I do think that we do need, when Steve said that there's resistance, I want to make sure you understand. In some cases, that resistance just isn't because they want to keep a dollar. In some cases, it's the issue of we're putting on their back the requirement for risk in terms of mean distance between failure, the reliability or the availability of that piece of equipment. And so when we start to go in and then start to prescribe who their sub-unit suppliers are supposed to be, we start to walk into that risk envelope. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, I'm not saying we won't, but we should do it consciously and we should cross that threshold very carefully. But in a dialogue that we need to have with the board over a long period of time, there's a balance we need to have. When we get down to one or two suppliers, that's not good. On some parts and some equipment where there's a lot of manufacturers, you may have as many as 7 or 8. But for rail cars, with the 3 that we've had exceptionally good bids and exceptionally good reliability. And we will change some of the dynamic, but we want to do it in a conscious way.
Tom, you will recall that Jay Walter, to his credit, in an effort to try and expand the market for those who would manufacture buses, agreed in order to stimulate them to pay those who had not previously competed an additional bonus to get them into it. What I'm saying to you is, I'm fully aware that an argument can be put forward for virtually any position. I do it all the time. All right? The point I'm trying to make to you is we need to have an effort to expand competition, to solicit people to compete, to encourage their competition. It will save us, as you know full well, in the long run, a great deal of money. It will provide more local jobs. I don't need to have jobs particularly in either Nebraska or in any other part of the country. I need them in New York. And my point is that will encourage it. That's what the governor wants in this state. And I congratulate you for your effort, and I ask you to redouble it.
Turning back to the principal issue of the $5.8 million procurements, are there any other questions, or should we throw them back because they're too small and need to grow up? Anyone want to move the procurements? All in favor? Any opposed? Procurements are adopted.
Service changes?
Service changes.
Moving on to Section 7 of the agenda, we have the service change proposal regarding improved bus service in Co-op City. This is for information alone. This is the one item that was discussed in the public speaking period. If you recall, when we reconstructed the bus service network to try to get some economies up in Co-op City and the services that are provided there, we got a number of comments from elected officials regarding the ability for an intra-Co-op City service. And what this response is a no-cost way of trying to restore that which was lost when we went through the service revision. It does not restore it in toto, but it does restore it to the maximum degree we can within the no-cost items. Did you want to elaborate on that any more, Peter, or does that summarize it?
What the BX30 does is it provides connectivity from Section 5 to much of the rest of Co-op City. There are 2 areas that it doesn't operate on: Co-op City Boulevard, where another route, MTA buses, Q50, provides that connectivity, and Ash Loop. It didn't go in there. So what this does is it connects into Ash Loop as well. There are other buses that during off-peaks also do this connectivity, but in the middle of the rush hour there was a disconnect between Section 5 and Ash Loop, so this addresses that.
And there's no additional cost, as I recall.
Correct. This is just a relatively short one-block diversion.
Does this positively address the comment made by the public speaker?
I don't think it positively addresses to the degree that they would like it addressed, but based upon conversations, I can't speak for the individual that spoke today, but for the contact we had out with the community, with the elected officials, we could not replicate that which existed in the past without hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment, and we just didn't have it.
Special presentations?
There's 2 items in the board package in terms of MetroCard and the information on weight assessment, which stand on their own. But this morning we'd like to give a presentation on something that's you probably read in the news media over the weekend. It's what we call our partial line segment closure program. We've been faced over the past few years with an increasing difficulty at getting the myriad of different inspection and maintenance work done, as well as capital work on the subway, and do it in a way that's safe for our employees, safe for our customers, gets the right levels of productivity so that we can get work done in the most efficient manner possible within the ever-constraining budgets that we have. And we had to basically step outside of the paradigms we were in, because historically we moved work like this to weekends and nights. And actually the growth we've seen in the system, and Joe Leader, who's going to give this presentation, will go through it, in terms of ridership, where there's an increase in the number of discretionary riders we have, has been in weekends and nights. So we've come up with a way that we think we can try to minimize the impacts and get this critical work done. Joe?
Thank you. I'd like to start by saying thank you to Tom and to Carmen Bianco for allowing me the opportunity to speak to the TA committee. First slide. In a system that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no time is a good time to perform inspection or maintenance work along the right-of-way. New York City is one of a few rail transit systems still operating 24 hours a day. In a system like New York City Transit, inspections and maintenance activities are critical to safety and service reliability. Operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, makes this work much more difficult to perform since crews are constantly clearing up for trains. This work requires time and mental focus, hard to achieve when working under traffic. At times when maintaining assets is no longer a viable option, system or component upgrades are needed, and this is performed through our capital program under shutdowns performed mostly on weekends and weeknights in the subway. Next slide. In 1986, when I first began working here at New York City Transit, track access was a maintenance division's dream. Early weekday and weeknight general orders were a norm, and working under flags in our system saw no restrictions. What changed? An increase in ridership has changed the way we do business, seeing work under flags having limited hours for track access and capital work being limited on weekdays and weeknights, forcing much of this work on the weekends. The graph displayed shows how much ridership has increased since 2001. Most notably, 82% of the 200 million new riders using our system today use it during the off-peak hours, mainly on the weekends. Next slide. Even though track access is limited today, maintaining assets is critical in regards to safety, improving and maintaining service reliability, and to extend the useful life of our infrastructure and our system components. Our current business model has our employees performing much of this work under traffic. When working under traffic, work crews are required to establish flagging protection, and we call that mini slow speeds. These safety precautions have a negative effect on running regular service. In short, working under flags not only is non-productive at times, but also requires multiple stop-go activities for the work crews, and is in direct conflict with our corporate goal, which is moving our customers timely and without delays. The chart below is an indication of how work gangs performing essential work on the right-of-way affects service, and these figures are from the month of September. Next slide. What is our solution? It is to create more track access, scheduled and planned, that allows our work crews to become more efficient and still allow us to provide a safe environment and reduce customer disruption. Next slide. To accomplish that, we have created two new strategies. Our goal here is to create opportunities where a concentration of work can be achieved with uninterrupted time periods. These two initiatives are a maintenance line segment closure and a capital track line segment closure. Next slide. What is the benefit of both types of closures? Improved safety and productivity, and shortening the length of a project, as well as the duration outstanding defects remain open. On the chart, we provided two examples of the types of maintenance efficiencies. One is in signals, and one is in the track department. Next slide. What is our proposal? In 2012, for the maintenance line segment closure, we propose an essential business district with significant alternate service exists, we are proposing to shut down a line segment, all tracks, leaving the adjacent lines in the central business district on the other corridors in full service in the same area. This shutdown would occur once per quarter and last for 4 consecutive nights from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. Our first pilot segment is scheduled for January 2012 and will be on the Lexington Avenue line. And if you look at that map, the line that's in red is the Lexington Avenue line. The lines that are in green are the 7th, 6th Avenue, and the 8th Avenue lines, and those are the areas that will be left in full service as we perform a complete shutdown in that line segment area. Next slide. What is the customer impact? Limited in ridership count in comparison to the system-wide total on the overnight, and we believe a typical closure will add an additional 10 to 15 minutes to one's commute. However, from a safety and a service standpoint, New York City will benefit. New York City will provide its employees a safe work environment and will allow them time to perform focused and quality inspections and maintenance.
Just, Tom, why do you not have the NQ&R included as an alternate route?
I believe we're just listing ones that are going to be impacted. We don't have any closures of the NQ&R, but that route would be open.
It would be open, but it wasn't shown as listed as an alternate on the other slide. So.
The only reason why we did that was because the other lines that were indicated are part of our scheduled or proposed shutdowns for the first quarter. But we don't plan on.
Does that mean you would be doing work on the Lex and the NQR at some point together?
No.
So the NQR would be an alternate route, would it not?
Correct.
That is correct.
Well, it wasn't shown as one, so.
Apologize. Yeah. Okay.
See, you can't sneak a chart like that through Andrew, you know. He'll find something that you missed.
While you're on that, I noticed the map deals with primarily Manhattan. Are you confining these closures to Manhattan at this stage?
Yes.
Is there any contemplation that within calendar year 2012 that a program would extend to the outer boroughs?
From the maintenance line segment program, no. What we would like to do for 2012 is concentrate our efforts on the shutdowns in that Manhattan area.
We want to learn with this program to see what impacts it has to customers. We want to see, you know, can we actually achieve the productivity under the safety protocols we have established. It just so happens in Manhattan where we have a concentration of a lot of work being done, that's where we're starting, but also you have a lot of parallel lines that you can offer as an alternate means of service. So we want to test bed it there first.
May I ask you one more question while we're on this? Conceptually, I think this is the only way you can go. But my question to you is, do you really need to have 16 days or up to 16 days for these capital programs?
Let the presentation complete, because I think Joe gave you some examples where you're doing chips out of concrete over long sections of track. And it's like the old tram oil commercial. You can pay me now or you can pay me later. But take a look at the presentation and see if that answers you.
Okay. From an efficiency standpoint, we believe a productivity benefit will be achieved in the amount of $10 to $15 million per year. Next slide. Here is our proposal for the first quarter maintenance closures. We will start first with the Lexington Avenue line in January, and that will be followed by the 7th Avenue line, the 6th Avenue line, and finally the 8th Avenue line. Next slide. I've just spoken about the maintenance line segment closures, but we are also scheduling capital track line segment closures. During our review of 2012 capital track projects, my managers have identified projects where a track segment closure will work. Our intent is to remove from service a track line segment 24 hours a day up to 16 days. What is the benefit? It is increased productivity, a decrease in project length, and increase in safety.
Do you have, one question, do you have as yet compatibility, concurrence under the labor agreements that you have that would permit this?
We're not changing scope rules of the employees at all. It's just a matter of timing, and also we're not changing scope rules, nor are we changing tours. If we're doing something on overtime, it's within the existing collective bargaining agreement. It's all within the existing collective bargaining agreement.
Well, they should be happy because it's a lot safer. Because you used to lose a lot of those people, didn't you?
Yes.
So, Tom, I'm sorry. By doing this method, you are eliminating some weekend closures that would have taken place?
Yes,
Correct.
you'll see the presentation later.
Okay.
Correct. Next slide. This slide talks about south of Van Wyck Boulevard. It's a job that was originally scheduled to be over a 1,000-foot chip out. As you can see, if the project was scheduled using conventional thinking, the project duration would be 8 weekends plus 20 weeknights for a total of 36 days. Using a line segment closure, our plan is modified and can be accomplished in 9 days, working 24 hours per day. As you can see, we anticipate a $1.3 million savings, and most importantly, have reduced the project duration, limiting the effects of the project on the public. Next slide. In 2012, we have identified the following projects which will be performed under a track line segment closure. We just spoke about south of Van Wyck Boulevard. The next project is south of 161st Street on the concourse line. That is a 9-day shutdown. North of 179th Street on the Queens line, that is an interlocking. That is also a 9-day shutdown. South of Bay 50th is an interlocking project. 5 switches will be renewed. That is scheduled to be a 16-day shutdown. And south of White Plains Road is also another interlocking project. 5 switches as well as some additional panels is scheduled to be a 16-day shutdown.
Joe or Peter, a question was raised by Andrew, and I think we need to address it at this point. In the case of the maintenance slide closures, where they were a total closure of all 4 tracks for those 4 nights, for those hours, on some of these capital track, there's a ride-back option. Could you explain that? Because it's not totally taking the entire line out of service.
Well, it, again, depends. So going back, first of all, to the overnight shutdowns, I think Joe made it clear, but just to reemphasize, for the most part, there won't be any additional substitute service, but these are areas of the city where usually there's another subway corridor, an avenue block away. People will be directed to use that and then transfer to get back to where they're going. And that's why we concentrated in those areas. It's also because there was a lot of work to be done there. In these closures, in the case of the first one, it will be the local track east of Continental Avenue out of service. So for those 9 days, passengers will have to go backwards to get a train going towards Manhattan. The second item is taking out the express tracks on the concourse line. So for 9 days, it would be all local service. That's a less of an impact to riders. The next one is actually in the yard track, so it really is it's more of an internal constraint than a publicly noticeable one. The fourth one is the south of Bay Parkway to Coney Island, in the middle of August when there's not a school market there. We believe a relatively minor bus replacement will be sufficient. And then the last one is a short section in the North Bronx where there's existing bus service at the terminal at 241st Street. So we're surgically going through the system where the lines can be taken out without a significant expense in buses as well as inconvenience to the riders that would negate the benefits they're getting on the track program.
In the case of the ride back on the Van Wyck one, as you know, headways in the middle of the night are 20 minutes. Is there going to be something done to make it so that you won't have a 20-minute and maybe another 20-minute wait when you ride back? Are they going to be coordinated so that folks will have that option?
Well, keep in mind, first of all, this is 24 hours a day, so it's rush hours.
Oh, it's 24 hours?
Yes.
So this isn't one of those other ones.
Right. All these we're talking about are 24 by 9, basically. So in the middle of the night, it would be the same service, but also in the middle of the rush.
Let me ask you, why is it that you need a 16-day window? Is it, if you applied more people to the job, would it be done quicker? Is it that, and second part of that is, after you've done the 16 days, are you still going to have the work gangs there every day, or what?
No, but we need the 16 days because both interlockings we're looking at 5 switches that expand across all 3 tracks and additional panels in between. In fact, south of Bay Parkway, that interlocking spans the 3 tracks and also the yard track that leads into Coney Island Yard.
So it's a huge job, and it's easier to do it under a 16-day shutdown than on the weekends.
But we are constrained by the total number of track employees we have in the capital
Correct.
track division, and we're not going to hire just for making this, and we can't add overtime. So this is we're trying to get the maximum productivity time in the minimum number of days, and that's how you end up with 16.
Why can't you add overtime?
No, we are adding overtime, but the issue is you can only fit so many people in a small area. Although it's a large interlocking, it's in a small area just south of the station, so you just can't have multiple crews, all working, because you're basically building from one switch off the other. So it's like a puzzle. By flooding it with another 100 workers, it's not going to work.
I don't question that this is necessary. All I'm saying is get ready for tons of screams.
Okay. Next slide. What is our next priority? Communicate to our customers our plans and why this new business model is needed. We will get the message out through station signage, on-train notices, the MTA website, social media, email alerts, and newspaper ads. And we will also outreach to the elected officials, community boards, and affected businesses and institutions. In summary, our current business model has the majority of our inspections and maintenance work being performed under traffic. On a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation, no time is a good time to perform this work. Capital track work in the subway today continues to be performed on weeknights and weekends. In order to become more efficient, productive, and provide a safer work environment to our employees that allows them the time to perform inspections and quality maintenance, New York City Transit is proposing 2 initiatives involving limited line segment closures. We believe although some riders will be impacted, the benefits achieved will improve service reliability and limit long-term weekend outages in the future.
Thank you, Joe, for that report, and thank you, Tom, for spearheading this radical and very important change to maintaining our system. I apologize to you both for the interruptions during your presentation, but as you probably gathered, interrupting is a great tradition in this committee. Any more questions on this subject? Follow-up reports?
No, I think we're done. I think Michael has
You're
some
done?
of them.
We're all ready for Michael? You ready, Michael? Okay. Get
Okay.
it.
Let me start with the Fulton Street Transit. We just opened a new entrance at Broadway between Fulton and that's it. Between the Fulton and John Street to the 405 platform, connecting to the AC mezzanine to a temporary pedestrian transfer. Actually, that allows us to continue the work. This is actually the entry point, followed by the basically going stairs to the AC mezzanine, protected, and then going from there down to the, in effect, to a corridor. We're constructing both left and right of it, and then going into the, in fact, to the 405 southbound. This is the steel work, steel construction that in the major steel work was completed. This actually will be the oculus, and the we expect on the weekend, the next weekend, to disassemble the crane. This is actually the steel work in the interior side of the transit. This is what it's supposed to look like on the left side. In fact, it just tells you the story that most of the steel work is right now in place. And then the Corbin building, that is a historical building, the facade has been cleaned, and we are proceeding with the work. The north, we are showing in our contract somewhere that we have dated contract lateness, and this is actually due to the implementation of the new technology for the passenger information wayfinding, and that the delay will not affect the June 2014 overall completion date that I presented, and that's for customer benefits milestone. So that's on time. It's just an internal thing that we are adding work. We have added work, so that may somewhat delay the contract itself, but not the opening. I would like to move on to the Second Avenue. The Second Avenue actually work is proceeding, and what you are or will be looking at is the 70th Street cavern looking northbound, and what you see down there is actually the west tunnel that is at the lower level as we're getting closer to it. And we just protected it so we can do the shotcreting on one side, and while we're continuing to mine on this side. The work basically continuing throughout, and this is again the cavern at 72nd that is being taken out, various parts of it, and that's getting loaded actually into the muck house. That's the muck house that you're looking at, and this is at 72nd Street shaft, and we are hauling everything up and then transporting it by truck in an enclosed environment. The work itself at the Second Avenue at this point is proceeding. We have, in effect, transferred the north shaft on November 1st to the new contractor, Skanska Trailer from Denanzio's, and the work is going to start there, where we're going to start building 2 new mock houses in order to protect the environment around it.
Why did you decide not to use the conveyor belt removal system that you're using for East Side access?
Well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, these are independent sites, and the underground is still controlled by the tunneling contractor that is actually finishing the contract. So you cannot have both at the same time. So that was clearly a major thing. We wanted to take out the linearity of these projects and be able to work independently so we can get it done on time, and that's one of the main reasons we have done that. The only other thing I would mention is that the data collection for the air monitoring has been completed, and we expect to have a report in December to the community. That's about it as far as the Second Avenue. I would like to now move to the number 7 line extension. In fact, the work for underground structural work was completed basically just about now. We transferred the site J to the second contractor, the finishing contractor. The completion of the tunnels and station structure was done about 10 months ahead of schedule, so they moved quite fast. We are now moving into a very delicate part of the work in which the systems and finishes contract is in place, and we'll be working closely with New York City Transit in order to be able to bring it to a successful completion. The future construction on Site P, basically, we expect to have a bid opening in March 2012. The project, as it stands, is well within budget and on time. That's about it.
Being on budget and 10 months ahead of schedule is very bad for your reputation.
Well,
We've warned you about this.
I'm trying to survive that one.
Any other questions for Michael? Any further business to come before the meeting? Chuck.
Question concerning the elevator and escalator outages as reported. It's in 2 parts. First, do you have an inspection service that goes around and inspects the elevators and the escalators, say, once a month?
We have our own inspection and maintenance personnel that go on a prescribed schedule depending upon the device itself and the standard we have for it.
How frequently?
Well, it's checked every day, every shift by our stations department, and then beyond that, there's a regular inspection cycle for every one of those units.
City of New York has historically had elevator and escalator inspection programs that have turned out to be quite good. To the extent that you can emulate that, that would be useful in terms of heading up.
Absolutely.
Secondly, you list in here a number of outages, and in many instances, both the elevator and the escalators are out at the same time, like Jamaica and the like. But this report doesn't tell you how many days they're out. And that's the critical issue. You can be out, as you know, for an hour or two, and that's an outage. Or you can be out for 3 months, and that's an outage. And you got a case here where the controller was no good, and so you were out for days on days. I think there's 3 months in one case.
Well, there's certain devices, they're one-offs in terms of the component being out, and we have to remanufacture, have that component remanufactured that will be out for extended outages. That's what does it. Those numbers actually have a tremendous impact, not only on the customers at the station, but on the availability overall of the system. But we're going to take a look at the issue of how we measure the elevator and escalator. We wanted to put the management changes in place first. We wanted to actually see if some of the new initiatives we put underway were bearing fruit, and then we're going to come back and take a look at the measures themselves.
Good.
Entertain a motion to adjourn. We're going to go right into the bus meeting, so don't go too far. All in favor? We're adjourned. We're going to go right into the bus meeting, though.
Whoa.